The night my son took his wife's entire family out to celebrate his promotion, everyone, except me, my daughter-in-law, didn't forget to smile and remind me that the leftovers in the fridge had been sitting there for over 2 days now, and that I should try to finish them off so nothing went to waste. I didn't argue. I simply nodded. Then, in the silence of that empty house, I quietly did something none of them could have ever expected. When they came home the next morning, I was no longer there. And what they saw when they walked through that door, what I had left behind, changed everything. My name is Gerald, and I am 64 years old. I spent 38 years delivering mail on the same East Point route, rain and sleet, and Atlanta summer heat that would crack a sidewalk. I raised one son in this house. I buried my wife in this city. And somehow, somewhere between all of that living, I became invisible inside my own walls. Stay with me until the end of this story, because I promise you, it goes somewhere you will not see coming. And if you've ever been made to feel small by someone you would have given the world to, I think you need to hear what I did about it. I want to be honest with you right now. When I first started telling people this story, some of them looked at me and said, "Gerald, you were too harsh." And I used to let that get to me. I don't anymore. It was a Wednesday evening in late April, and the Atlanta humidity was already settling in like it does, heavy and low, the kind that makes the air feel like a wet towel pressed against your face. My son Darius, who is 35 years old, came through the front door of my house with that grin he used to get as a little boy when he'd aced a spelling test. His wife, Camille, followed 3 steps behind him, already scrolling her phone, already somewhere else in her head, even before she'd stepped inside. "Pop," Darius said, pulling at his tie like he'd been waiting all day to get free of it, "you are looking at the new Senior Operations Director of Meridian Consulting. Effective immediately." And I felt it. The real thing. Not the performance of it, actual pride. Because whatever had happened between us, Darius was still my son, and I had watched him work for this. I stood up from the couch where I'd been watching the evening news and I said, "Son, that is wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful." I meant every syllable. That's when I made the mistake of assuming this moment belonged to both of us. "We're going to Nikolai's roof tonight," Darius said, already pulling out his phone to start texting. "Everybody's coming. Camille's parents are driving up from Macon. Her brother and his wife, my buddy Terrence and his girl." He was typing fast, electric with excitement, and I was already calculating, did I have time to press my good gray slacks, the ones Margaret always said made me look distinguished? Camille walked over then. Her heels clicked across the hardwood floor I had mopped that very morning on my hands and knees, because the Swiffer wasn't getting into the corners the way she liked. She had that expression I had learned to dread, bright eyes, soft smile, the look of someone about to do something unkind and call it consideration. "Gerald," she said, and her voice was warm in that particular way that costs nothing. "You don't need to worry about getting dressed up or anything tonight." I looked at her. "I'm sorry? This is really for Darius's circle, you know? His colleagues, his support network, the people who've been part of his professional journey." She tilted her head slightly, the way you tilt your head at a child who's asked something sweet but impossible. "You understand." I understood. I understood so completely that I couldn't speak for a moment. I was standing in the living room where I had taught Darius to tie a double knot. The room where I had held my wife Margaret's hand the night she told me the cancer had come back. My living room. And I had just been told, in a voice made of honey and wire, that I was not part of my son's life. I looked at Darius. He was texting. He had not heard a word. "There's leftover jambalaya in the fridge," Camille continued, moving toward the hallway mirror to check her lipstick. "I labeled it, and there's some of those crackers you like in the pantry. Should be plenty for one person." She paused and glanced back at me. "Much more practical for someone your age, anyway. Big restaurant portions are a lot." Someone your age. I was 64, not dead. Darius came back into the living room, still glowing. "Terrence is meeting us there at 8. Pop, you good?" He was already moving toward the stairs to change. He was already gone. "I'm good," I said. Because that is what I always said. That is the sentence I had been saying for 4 years. "I'm good, of course. No problem. You go ahead. I'm fine." Camille smiled one last time, that bright, final smile, and she said, "You're such a steady man, Gerald. That's one thing I've always appreciated about you. You never make things complicated." She said it like a compliment. She meant it as instructions. They left at 7:15. I watched the taillights of Darius's Audi disappear around the corner of Delow Drive. And then the neighborhood went quiet, and the house, my house, felt like a museum after closing time. I walked to the kitchen. There was the container of jambalaya in the refrigerator, just like she said. My name was written on the lid in Camille's careful block letters, Gerald, like I might forget which leftovers were mine. Like I was a boarder. I set the container on the counter, and I sat down in the chair where Margaret used to sit when she was too tired to stand but still wanted to talk to me while I cooked. And I let the full weight of the last 4 years settle onto my shoulders without trying to shrug it off for the first time. Here's what I need you to understand, because this is the part that sneaks up on you. It wasn't one big moment. It never is. It was 4 years of almost nothing, 1,000 small surrenders that each seemed too minor to fight about. If you have ever slowly lost yourself inside a relationship, a marriage, a friendship, a family situation, and looked up one day to find a stranger living your life, you already know exactly what I mean. You know the particular loneliness of being dismissed by someone who is supposed to see you. It doesn't announce itself, it just accumulates. Margaret died 4.5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, which is the kind that doesn't give you much time to argue with it. She was gone in 7 months. Darius was living in Midtown then, making decent money at a logistics firm, dating Camille, whom I had met twice and found polite in a careful, effortful way that made me pay attention. When Margaret died, Darius came home for the funeral and stayed for 2 weeks, and those were the last 2 weeks I remember feeling like his father instead of his liability. He and Camille got engaged 8 months later. They asked if they could move in with me for a year, maybe 18 months while they saved for a house. Margaret's garden was still growing. The house felt enormous for one person. I said yes immediately, the way you do when loneliness and generosity are pointing in the same direction. That was my first miscalculation. Things shifted so gradually that I could never name the exact moment each thing changed. Darius used to make us coffee together on Saturday mornings. Then he was sleeping in. Then Camille had plans on Saturdays. The fishing trips we'd taken every spring since he was 9 years old just stopped happening. I cooked dinner most nights because I liked to cook, and because Camille said she was still learning. That part was true, I think. But still learning became permanent, and cooking became my job, listed on no paper but understood by everyone. Then cleaning was added. Then grocery shopping, with Camille's list specific brands, specific quantities, specific instructions about which checkout line had the best self-scan station. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was helping. I told myself Margaret would have wanted me to take care of our son. I paid for their wedding flowers. $3,200 that I did not have budgeted but gave because Darius mentioned they were stretched thin. I co-signed a car loan for Camille because her credit had a gap. When their lease on a storage unit came due, I paid it without being asked, because the stuff inside was overflow from my house, and it seemed like the right thing to do. Honestly, sitting here telling you this now, I feel something close to embarrassment. Not because I was wrong to love my son, but because I mistook being needed for being loved. Those are very different things. The money had been bleeding for years before I understood the full picture. And it was my doctor, a quiet, perceptive man named Dr. Osei at the Grady Health Clinic, who finally said the thing out loud that nobody else had. "Gerald," he said, during a checkup where my blood pressure had climbed to a number that made him frown, "are you being taken advantage of at home?" He slid a business card across the desk. "An attorney. Just in case you ever feel like you need to understand your options." I almost laughed, but I kept the card. 3 weeks later, I called the number. His name was Marcus Webb, a property and elder law attorney with an office off Cascade Road, far enough from my neighborhood that I wouldn't recognize anyone in the parking lot. He was younger than I expected, mid-40s, and he listened to everything I said without once looking at his phone. When I finished, he leaned forward and said, "Mr. Gerald, what you're describing has a name. It's called financial exploitation, and it falls under elder abuse statutes in Georgia." Elder abuse. The words sat in the air between us like something solid. "The house," Marcus said carefully. "Is it in your name alone?" It was. Margaret and I had put it solely in my name when we bought it in 1993 because I had the better credit history. I had never updated the deed, despite Camille's several pointed suggestions that we consider the family's future by adding Darius to the title. "You have more power than you realize," Marcus told me. This is entirely your property. Over the next 6 months, Marcus helped me see something I had deliberately blurred for years. I was not broke. I had Margaret's life insurance, largely untouched. I had a pension from the postal service. I had savings and a small rental property, a 2-bedroom in College Park I'd owned for 12 years that I had never once mentioned to Darius or Camille because it never seemed relevant. And I had a house in East Point that, in the current Atlanta market, was worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $380,000. You could sell this house tomorrow, Marcus said, and have enough to start over anywhere you want. The idea felt impossible at first. This was where Darius learned to walk. This was where I planted Margaret's gardenias. How do you sell 31 years of a life? But as the months passed, and the container labels kept appearing in the refrigerator, and the cleaning schedule Camille had typed and laminated and stuck to the pantry door kept getting longer, something in me began to change. The house wasn't a family home anymore. It was a place where I cooked and cleaned and stayed out of the way while other people lived loudly around me. I listed the house 6 months ago. An agent 2 counties over. Someone Camille would never have occasion to run into. The showings happened on weekday mornings when both of them were at work, and I told them I was at the pharmacy or the barber. The house sold in 5 weeks to a young couple, the Pattersons, who had 2 little girls, and walked through the place 3 times before making an offer. The wife cried a little in the living room. I told her about Margaret's gardenias in the backyard, and she promised to take care of them. The closing was yesterday. Tonight, while Darius and Camille raised glasses at Nikolai's roof, I moved through each room of the house one final time. I took my clothes, my books, the photo albums, and the watch I wore on my wedding day. I left behind the furniture Camille had picked out, the television she'd insisted we needed, the standing mixer she used twice and then lost interest in. I loaded 3 suitcases into my Buick, and then I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote the letter I had been composing in my head for months. Darius and Camille, it began. By the time you read this, I will already be in another state. My hand was steadier than I expected. The house has been sold. Closing was yesterday. The new owners take possession tomorrow morning at 10. Please remove your belongings before then. I kept writing. I did not rush. You have been living in my home for 4 years. In that time I have paid the mortgage, the property taxes, insurance, and utilities. I have cooked your meals, cleaned your messes, run your errands, and subsidized your lifestyle. I have done all of this while being treated as hired help, rather than as a man who raised his son in this house and buried his wife in this city. I am done accepting that. I paused and looked at the kitchen. The gardenias would be visible through the window in the morning, in the way the early sun hit the backyard. The Pattersons' girls would probably love that garden. I am leaving you the apartment on Willowbend Court in College Park. You may not have known it existed. The current tenants leave next week. Rent is $900 per month, utilities not included. This is not cruelty. This is consequence. There is a difference, and I hope you come to understand it. I sealed the envelope. I set it on the table under Margaret's old ceramic bread box, the one shaped like a rooster that Darius used to think was the funniest thing he'd ever seen when he was 4 years old. Then I walked through the house one last time, turning off lights, the way I had done every night for 31 years. At the front door I stopped. I let myself feel it, the weight of leaving. The grief and the relief tangled together so tightly I couldn't have told you which was which. I thought about Margaret. I thought about the version of this house that existed when she was alive, when it was full of food smells and gospel music on Sunday mornings and the sound of her laughing at something on the television. Then I thought about the laminated cleaning schedule, and I locked the door. I was outside Chattanooga when my phone first lit up. It was past 2 in the morning, and I'd been driving for 3 hours, the highway dark and open and mine. The call was from Darius. I let it ring. It rang again and again. After the 5th call, I pulled over at a rest area, turned my phone face down on the passenger seat, and sat in the quiet for a long moment. I want to be honest with you, I didn't feel what I thought I would feel. I thought I would feel guilty, or frightened, or like maybe I'd made a terrible mistake. What I actually felt was something close to weightlessness. Like I had been carrying something for years on my back and had finally set it down. I arrived in Savannah just as the sky was doing that thing it does over the Georgia coast, going from gray to pink to gold all at once, like a slow exhale. I had not told Darius I was moving to Savannah. I had not told anyone except Marcus and my sister Lorraine in Columbia, South Carolina, who had been telling me for 2 years that I needed to get out of that house. The place I'd bought was a small bungalow in the Starland district, 2 bedrooms, a deep porch, a backyard with an old fig tree that the listing description called characterful, and which I immediately loved. I had bought it virtually, which was the most reckless and most freeing thing I had ever done. My new neighbor, an older woman named Miss Eunice, who grew herbs in every windowsill, came out to meet me before I'd finished unloading my second suitcase. "You must be the new neighbor," she said. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." She wasn't waiting for anything from me. She was just glad I was there. I stood in my new driveway, and I felt something crack open in my chest, not in a painful way. In the way a window opens in a room that's been shut too long. At 10 that morning, I finally turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls. 11 voicemails. I listened to the first 3. Darius's voice in the first message was high and panicked. "Pop, what is going on? There are people here saying they bought this house. They have paperwork. Call me back." The second message was harder. "Dad, this isn't funny. Where are you? Call me right now." By the third, his voice had changed into something I hadn't heard since he was a boy. "Dad, I found your letter." I don't understand. Please, just call me." I deleted all the voicemails. Then I blocked the number. "I want to speak directly to you for a second, because I know some of you are thinking, 'Gerald, that was too far.' And I hear you. I understand that reaction, but here is what I need you to consider. I had been saying I'm fine for 4 years. I had been cooking and cleaning and subsidizing and shrinking and accommodating. I had said everything I could say without words, and nothing changed. Sometimes the only sentence that lands is the one you say with your absence. If you have ever been in a room where someone looked straight at you and saw right through you, someone who was supposed to love you, then you know the particular exhaustion of trying to make yourself visible to someone who has decided not to see you. You know how much energy goes into staying patient, staying gracious, staying hopeful that something will shift. And you know the moment when you finally stop, when you realize that their blindness is not accidental, and that your presence is no longer necessary for your own life. That was my moment. The first weeks in Savannah were quiet in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I cooked exactly what I wanted for dinner. I ate it in peace. I walked to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings and took my time. I volunteered at a community center on MLK Boulevard, helping seniors with tax forms and benefits, paperwork work that was useful in a way that was chosen, not extracted. I found a group of men my age who met on Tuesday mornings for a slow walk along the riverfront, and then argued pleasantly about baseball for an hour at a diner afterward. Nobody needed anything from me except my company. That distinction changed me in ways I'm still discovering. Camille found me 6 weeks later. I don't know how I assumed Darius hired someone, which was a decision that told me everything about whether anything had truly changed. She walked into the community center on a Tuesday afternoon looking completely out of place in her full Atlanta outfit among people in comfortable shoes. When she saw me, she performed warmth the way she always had, arms open, expression concerned, voice soft. "Gerald, thank God. We've been worried sick." I stepped back before she could reach me. "How did you find me?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that we're family. And what matters," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "is that you are standing in my space without an invitation. I would like you to leave." Camille's performance slipped. Not all the way, she was too skilled for that, but enough. Her eyes hardened. "You want to know what's happening back home? Darius lost his job. 3 weeks after you abandoned us, his company downsized and he was let go. We're struggling, Gerald, really struggling. That tiny apartment you stuck us in costs more than—" "Camille." I said her name quietly, the way you say something when you want it to land cleanly. "Darius is 35 years old. He has a college degree and real work experience. He will find another job. His temporary difficulty is not my permanent responsibility." Her voice dropped to something uglier. "You're a selfish old man. We gave you purpose. We gave you a reason to get out of bed every morning. Without us, what are you?" I looked at her, standing there in the middle of a room full of people who had welcomed me because they valued my presence, and I felt something toward her I had not expected. Not anger. Pity. She had lived her entire adult life believing that usefulness was the same as love, that managing people was the same as caring for them. That was a lonely way to be a person, even if she would never be able to see it. "I think you should go home," I said. "Tell Darius I'm well." She left. I went back to work. That evening, I called Lorraine in Colombia and talked for an hour. She said exactly what I needed to hear, which was nothing strategic. She just listened and then said, "You did right, Gerald. You did right. We made plans for Thanksgiving." It would be the first holiday I hadn't spent performing gratitude for an invitation to my own table. 3 months later, a letter arrived forwarded from my old East Point address. It was from Darius, written in his handwriting on yellow legal pad paper, the kind of writing that only happens late at night when everything else has been stripped away. "Pop," it began. "I know you probably don't want to read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away. But I need to say it anyway because I should have said it 2 years ago." I made myself a cup of coffee before I continued. He wrote about the fishing trips, about how I had driven him to every college visit, slept in cheap motels to save money, and never once made him feel like a burden. He wrote about the promotion dinner, he said. He had realized in the parking lot of Nikolai's roof, before they even went inside, that something was wrong, that he had felt it, but he had chosen not to act on it because it was easier not to. That admission cost him something. I could feel it in the writing. He wrote, "I let Camille teach me that being useful was the same as being loved, and then I turned around and did the exact same thing to you. I don't know how to forgive myself for that yet, but I needed you to know that I see it now. Camille and I are separated. She moved back to Macon." I read the letter twice. Then I put it in the drawer where I keep Margaret's jewelry and important papers. I did not call him that night. I was not ready, and being ready was now a condition I was allowed to have. I want to tell you what this story taught me, because I think it matters. Not just for older people, not just for parents, for anyone who has ever been in the position of giving everything and receiving diminishment in return. The mistake most people in my situation make is staying too long in the hope that the person will eventually see you. And I understand that hope. I lived inside it for 4 years. But hope directed at someone who is not trying to see you is not hope. It is just waiting. And you can spend a life that way. What I understand now, sitting on this Savannah porch with Miss Eunice's herbs in the window next door, and the fig tree going gold in the fall light, is that dignity is not something another person can give you. They can take it, yes, piece by piece, the way Camille did, the way I allowed, but reclaiming it is entirely your own work. Nobody can do it for you, and it is never too late to begin. The practical thing I want to offer you today is this. If you have a lawyer, call them. If you don't, find one. Understand what you own. Understand what your rights are. Before I called Marcus Webb, I had no idea how much agency I actually had. Information is the first form of power, and too many people in situations like mine are operating in the dark because nobody told them to look. The question I want to leave you sitting with is this. What have you been tolerating that you have been calling love? Sit with that one. 6 months after arriving in Savannah, I got a phone call from Darius on a quiet Saturday morning. I was in the backyard trying to figure out what to do with the fig tree. I answered because something in me said it was time. "Pop." His voice was different than I remembered. Quieter, older. "Hey, son." We talked for almost an hour. He told me about a woman named Priya he'd been seeing, a civil engineer from Augusta who he said does not let me get away with anything. He said it with a laugh that sounded like his real laugh, not his performing laugh. He told me he'd found a new position, smaller company, less money, but work he actually cared about. And then, near the end of the call, he said, "She's pregnant, Pop. We found out last week." I sat down in the grass next to the fig tree. "That's wonderful, Darius." And I meant it all the way down. "I want this baby to know their grandfather," he said. "I'm not going to pressure you. I know I haven't earned the right to make demands. But I want you to know the door is open. Whenever you're ready, or if you're never ready, I'll find a way to accept that too." After we hung up, I sat in that yard for a long time. I am not going to tell you that everything is fixed. It isn't. I am not going to tell you that one good phone call heals 4 years of being invisible. It doesn't. But I will tell you that I opened a savings account the following Monday and started making monthly deposits into it. When that baby is old enough for school, for a car, for a first apartment, the money will be there, quietly, with no strings and no invoice, because that is what love actually looks like, when it isn't being confused with leverage. On my 65th birthday, Miss Eunice brought over a peach cobbler, and 4 people from the community center came over to the porch. We sat and watched the evening come in over the rooftops, talking about nothing in particular, and I realized I was laughing. Not performing ease, not managing the room, actually laughing. I thought about the man who had sat alone in an East Point kitchen holding a container with his own name on it, written in someone else's handwriting, in his own home. That man had been disappearing slowly, cell by cell, and he had almost let it happen completely. But he had the courage to write a letter instead. Margaret used to say, and I can hear her voice when I tell you this, Gerald, you were made for more than being convenient. I didn't understand what she meant when she said it. I thought she was talking about my job, about my potential, about ambition. I understand now that she was talking about exactly this. About choosing, even late, even after years of not choosing, to live in a way that matches who you actually are. So, here's what I want to ask you tonight, before we close. Comment below and tell me, do you think I was right to leave the way I did? Comment 1 if you think I had no choice. Comment 2 if you think I should have confronted them directly first. And comment 3 if you think I went too far. I genuinely want to know what you think. And tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you've ever been in a situation where you gave and gave until there was nothing left, and you finally had to choose yourself, tell me about it in the comments. You don't have to share details. Just say, I understand, Gerald. That's enough. I'll know what you mean. If this story reached something in you, please consider subscribing so you never miss one. I share stories because I believe the things we carry in silence are heavier than anything we were ever meant to carry alone. You deserve to hear that you are not alone in what you've been through, and that it is never not at 64, not at 74, not at any age too late to close a door quietly, walk to your car, and drive towards something that is entirely, finally, yours. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences. Fully rewritten and reimagined, set in Atlanta and Savannah, Georgia, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental,